I'm Jim Obergefell, and I'm the named plaintiff from the Supreme Court decision Obergefell v. Hodges, which made marriage equality the law of the land on June 26, 2015. I found myself in that case not by plan, but by happenstance. I'd been with my partner John for more than 20 years, and on June 26, 2013, the Supreme Court struck down the Federal Defense of Marriage Act in their decision United States versus Windsor. And I was standing next to John's bed, holding his hand, when that decision came out. John at the time was in at-home hospice care, dying of ALS. That Windsor decision is sinking in. I realized that here's our opportunity to get married and have at least the federal government see us, recognize us. So I proposed, and he said yes. And we lived in Cincinnati, and Ohio at the time had its own state-level version of the Defense of Marriage Act, which defined marriages only between one man and one woman. So we had to figure out where to go, how to take a dying man with no physical abilities to another state to do something millions of others took for granted. So we got married in Maryland at BWI Airport inside a chartered medical jet. And we flew home, and that was all we wanted to do. We just wanted to get married and be able to call each other husband and husband. Well, because of a newspaper article about us, a local civil rights attorney, Al Gerhardstein, reached out to us through friends and asked if we would be willing to meet. Al came to our home 5 days after we got married and pulled out a blank Ohio death certificate and said, "Do you guys understand that when John dies, his last record as a person will be wrong? Here where it says marital status at time of death, Ohio will say John was unmarried. And Jim, your name will not be here where it says surviving spouse name." It broke our hearts, but I think more importantly, it made us angry. So when Al asked if we wanted to do something about it, we said yes. 8 days after we got married, we filed suit in federal district court. The case was assigned to federal judge Timothy Black. He had to clear his docket because of John's health. And that meant 11 days after we got married, I was in federal district court in Judge Black's courtroom for the hearing on our case. And we won that same day. John died 3 months later to the day. After he died, of course, the state of Ohio appealed. So we filed our appeal with the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court accepted it. They heard oral arguments on the case on April 28, 2015. And on June 26, 2015, they released their ruling affirming the right for queer couples to marry nationwide. And I burst into tears, and I could hear people around the courtroom sobbing. In fact, Al told me later he's never seen so many attorneys crying in a courtroom. No surprise, my first thought was, John, I wish you were here. I wish you could experience this. I wish you could know that our marriage cannot be erased. What I wasn't expecting to feel was this realization that for the first time in my life as an out gay man, I felt like an equal American. You know, here we are 10 years after the decision, and I never thought I would be worried about marriage equality continuing as a right in our nation. You know, I knew back on June 26, 2015, that there would be pushback. That's just what happens in our country. Every time we take a step forward in civil rights or human rights, there's a pushback. But I certainly never expected that 10 years on, I would be worried that Obergefell would be overturned. We have two sitting Supreme Court justices who have point blank said they want to overturn Obergefell. And Clarence Thomas didn't leave it at just Obergefell. He also mentioned other cases that are important to the queer community. Lawrence versus Texas, which overturned anti-sodomy laws. So the fact that we have two justices telling people who are opposed to marriage equality, people who are opposed to LGBTQ plus equality, they have told them point blank, we don't like this either, so if a case should make it to us, we want to overturn it. How has any queer marriage ever impacted a straight marriage? It hasn't. And yet so many of these people continue to attack us, attack our families, our right to marry, all of our rights, especially the trans community. So yeah, I'm worried about marriage. And I'm happy we have the Respect for Marriage Act that was signed by President Biden in 2022. I'm glad that that is there as a backstop, because that piece of legislation requires all states to recognize all marriages. But if Obergefell is overturned, that piece of legislation, the Respect for Marriage Act, does not guarantee that couples can get a marriage license in the state they call home. So here in Ohio, we still have the state level Defense of Marriage Act on the books. So if Obergefell were overturned, the state of Ohio could immediately say, we will no longer issue marriage licenses to queer couples. We're heading backward in time instead of forward. We are going back to a time when people of color weren't considered human beings. Right now, that's what you're doing to the queer community. You are passing laws and doing things that tell us we are not human beings. We do not deserve the same rights as anyone else. We are moving backwards. I want a future where a queer kid doesn't have to be afraid or wonder, well, what kind of future do I have? They don't have to be terrified about being authentically themselves. So that's what I have to keep fighting for. And I really never did this with a plan. It was just by virtue of being in a situation saying, yes, let's fight for each other.